Okay, we're under agenda item ID1452 under Academic Services, the Academic Services Division, and this is an informational item on K-5 curriculum and instruction. I would like to thank our 3 elementary school principals who are here to share information on curriculum and instruction, and our Executive Director of Academic Services, Ms. Gina Michaelica.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board Chair, Board members, Dr. Romano. My name is Gina Michaelica, Executive Director of Academic Services, and I thank you for this opportunity. The purpose of the presentation today is to provide you with a brief overview on what curriculum and instruction looks like at the elementary level. During the presentation, you will be provided with information on the Florida standards, curriculum, and assessment. Last year, school and district administrators met throughout the year to problem solve around school and district data in order to develop a plan to build consistency and capacity throughout our district. This would help to ensure that students receive high-quality, rigorous lessons during core instructional time. Instructional strategies at this level are intended to build on student strengths and create a foundation for further learning and achievement. I have asked 3 elementary principals to present to you today, and they will outline what this looks like in English language arts and math at their school sites. I would like to introduce Mary Ledoux, principal at Eastside Elementary, Christina Garofano, principal at Westside Elementary, and Debbie Vermette, principal at Deltona Elementary.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to begin the presentation today. I'd like to take you back to 2010 so that we can talk briefly about how we got where we are today with Florida standards. At that point in time, it was determined that the next generation Sunshine State standards that we currently had in place in Florida were not getting us where we needed to be with our students. We were not creating critical thinkers, and we found that we had a need to go deeper with the standards with our students. So in 2010, the state rolled out intensive training for all leadership teams at schools, districts in the state of Florida, and that happened for 2 straight years, with the idea that in 2011, the first grade level, that being kindergarten, would implement those standards. So those are our students who are currently sitting in 4th grade. They are our primary grade level that began instruction with Common Core. There was intensive workshop and professional development for our Hernando County teachers. In 2014, the state moved towards changing the thought about Common Core towards Florida standards. Based on what we learned in those intensive trainings, principals came back to their schools and began implementation at their sites. But in monitoring data across the district, it was determined that principals and district leaders needed to get together to build capacity and consistency across the district so that instruction looked the same in each school within the district. Again, to build capacity and consistency. There was a lot of training after 2014 about what that looked like, because now we're looking at standards and how rigorous they are. On the next slide, we take a look at standards and the focus changing in terms of giving students strong foundations. It was at that point in time, language changed in terms of what instruction looked like. We began to hear terms specifically for mathematics, regarding students struggling with the problems and persevering in solving them. We heard topics like conceptual understanding as opposed to teaching algorithms. Students were asked to write about their thinking and put in writing how they solved problems conceptually. So it was no longer how I went to school, that we all memorized multiplication tables. It was the understanding of why 3 times 7 is 21 and how we got there. If you think back to the movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks, remember the part in the movie where they throw a bunch of junk on the table and there's engineers sitting around the table and they're asked to create an air cleaner out of junk. And so it was that conceptual understanding and persevering to solve a problem that we realized we had not created in our own children because they were memorizing algorithms. So again, that conceptual understanding and going deeper into why things are the way they are and explaining their thinking is what the standards were all about.
In English language arts, one of the things that really changed was the focus on multiple pieces of text. So when you go through the standards and you see what it looks like in English language arts, that was the big change that really happened for us. Our students were asked to read fiction and nonfiction prior to this change, but how they involved themselves within the text and how they integrated the writing piece into what they were reading was really the shift that happened. And we're going to be showing you guys some work samples from grade levels throughout K through 5 and what that looks like in the classroom today.
Again, when we look at mathematical standards, students were asked to think and communicate mathematically. That was something that they never had to do before. It was answer the question, fill out a worksheet, 30 problems on a page. Now we're asking them to be able to think deeper. Why is this working? Why is this the solution? How did I get to that problem? It's important to note that standards are not the curriculum. Again, standards are not the curriculum. Standards drive the curriculum. Teachers are allowed and enabled to pull resources to support curriculum and instruction in the classroom. And students are asked to understand why things happen. Students learn to write mathematical ideas, and the biggest change for our students is they learn to represent math concepts through multiple representations, through drawings, through graphs, through pictures, and understand why it works.
The materials teachers have to use today, they look at the standards and they have a wealth of materials. The first one that they're very used to and comfortable with is the textbook. But now we have so many more options, and we're not just held just to the textbook. That also helps us with the students that we have to scaffold lessons, differentiate lessons. So it's opened a lot more choices for them, which also can be very overwhelming. But we're finding that they're becoming more and more comfortable every day. So at first it was a big change to just let the textbook go, but they still often use it with supplementing other material. And what drove those textbooks in the first place was committees of teachers that chose those textbooks. So right now we have like Reading Street and Visions. So they do help with the lesson planning of what the teachers use to help the students achieve and learn the standards.
So then we get to the idea of the curriculum map and how we got there. What we found that as we were writing our school improvement plans at various schools, teachers were having difficulties understanding the standards and the level of rigor at which they were written. So the curriculum map, which was created by teams of teachers, representatives from schools, came together to create these maps supported by district leaders as a roadmap for helping teachers plan how to cover the standards at the rigor at which they are written. They were, again, developed with expertise from classroom teachers, and one of the biggest changes that we're seeing in Hernando County is it helps teachers utilize formative assessments to identify that students have gotten the lesson daily as it's being taught, instead of going along as a teacher and waiting until the benchmark assessment that might occur 2 weeks from now to determine my students didn't really get that. So that's a big instructional shift for them, and it was added in the daily expectation or every 2 days, depending on how long it takes to get through a lesson. So the maps help educators build those lessons. It helps them analyze the data that they get from formative assessments and determine whether the students are getting that concept at the time it was instructed. Trainings happened across the district throughout the summer. multiple trainings for every single grade level for reading, math, and writing, because it was a shift. Again, it's the standards and helping teachers understand what does a rigorous lesson look like to support those standards.
And assessment, along with the curriculum maps, and the curriculum maps is basically the balance test, which is the ELA test, the benchmark test, which is the math test, and then there's formative assessments and performance tasks. And this is, we're finding the tests are much more rigorous. We are seeing that across the board. Teachers are being asked to first look at the test, backwards plan, while unpacking the standards to create great lessons to help students be successful on those tests. So that's the ultimate goal. Within that, there are also categories of which students are graded and the percentages of which, trying to keep it all common along with all the elementary schools in the county, but it also gives what's called an other. And the other and performance tasks and formative assessments, which we are trying to get our teachers to do a lot more formative assessments, which is basically checking for understanding, making sure the students learned what they were supposed to learn that day, and then giving grades for that, which will help their grades from if the benchmark test or the Pearson balance test are too difficult. Our teachers across the district have been told by most of the principals to model these tests until they get comfortable with those tests by breaking apart the test and creating formative assessments to see just what the struggle is. So by doing so, this helps us to see what the student's struggling in, how we can change our instruction, and what we need to do as principals and teachers across the school district to create better lesson plans as we continue to tweak and get where we need them to be. I'm next too. Okay, I'm next too. Okay, and then we have continued assessment expectations. Assessment is very important in education because as the teacher teaches, they have to continually assess because we're seeing what are we doing in the classroom that is getting the engagement and the understanding of the curriculum across to the students. So it's an everyday thing. The higher order thinking becomes more challenging to the students and when we try to teach those standards. So we have new expectations. First of all, students have to read multiple texts, compare, write about them, understand them, comprehend them. And we consider this by them, the students, showing us a demonstration of the evidence of what they took in from the lesson that day. For instance, the reason why we did bring some samples to show you at the end is because our true evidence of the students understanding the curriculum is in the end product. The end product is being asked to be hung in the classrooms throughout the school for exemplar work to be shown, for the students to see the end product. We have anchor papers, rubrics, so they know what the teachers are asking them before they begin the lesson, and that's we find is very important. We also have the I-CAN statements that help to drive to what the student needs to gain out of that lesson for that day, for the week, and then what will be tied into the formative assessment. In writing, students are taught to write on task. They're taught to have a support response with specific evidence from their text. It's text-based writing. The old testing, we looked at based writing on prior knowledge. For instance, a student would have to write a narrative or an expository so they could tell a story and go on for hours. Now, the writing has become more rigorous, and it's more based on a stimulus. More evidence from the text must be shown, and it's opinion or informative, and it's totally text-based. So part of the learning today is teaching students how to find that evidence in the text, which is number one, which also helps them become a better reader and to comprehend what they're reading, but also able for them to understand, compare, contrast, and develop their own writing skills. The new focus on writing is students are taught to have a purpose, focus, and organization. There's always an intro, a body, and a conclusion, and it's a 10-point rubric system now. The teachers, like I said, 4 points goes to purpose, focus, and organization. 4 points is for evidence and elaboration, which is rigorous when you think about our elementary schools, students writing and understanding. And then finally, 2 points, which I think all teachers are happy about is conventions, because sometimes we lose that sight that that's important as well. So with that, the assessment expectations throughout is so important, and we're seeing more and more writing throughout the curriculum, not only with just ELA, but with math. And that also helps us to understand the students' understanding with the problems that they have to solve, because now they're being asked to explain how they solved it. So teachers are actually easy, I think it's easier for them to assess what math they're lacking and what skills and concepts through the writing of their explanation. And that's where we are.
We wanted to share with you 2 examples of specific standards. These are both first grade standards. And you can see, if you look at the math standards, solve word problems that call for addition of 3 whole numbers. One of the things our teachers have been tasked with is unpacking standards. You'll hear that term thrown around every once in a while, unpacking standards. These are first grade standards, and what teachers do is they sit down as a team and they plan together, and they create what's called a KUD chart. And basically we go through and we underline the verbs and the nouns, and we talk about what students need to know, what they need to be able to understand, and then what they need to be able to do. How are they going to show us mastery of a standard? So you can see on this math standard from grade 1, it tells us that students have to be able to use objects, drawings, and equations with a symbol for the unknown number to represent the problem. In 5th grade, that progression, students have to be able to solve word problems with decimals, fractions, represent real-world problems by graphing points in the first quadrant of the plane. So you can see how that rigor changes to 5th grade. And so in first and kindergarten, they may have lower level complexity, but we have to build that capacity throughout so that in 5th grade they're not hit with some of these standards. In language arts, the progression of standards is much more concrete. Reading strategies kind of spiral throughout. It's not the same as math. We don't build upon skills. It's really the same thing, just making it a little bit more rigorous. So in this example, in a first grade standard, it asks the students to describe the connection between 2 individuals, events, ideas, or pieces of information in a text. And this goes back to what we talked about before. Students have to be able to read multiple pieces of text and write about it, comparing it, making connections between it, how it connects to them, how it connects to the world. So in 5th grade, let me just share with you what that standard sounds like in 5th grade. It asks students to explain the relationships between 2 or more individuals, events, ideas, or concepts in a historical, scientific, or technical text based on specific information in the text. So what you can see there is the progression of the rigor, and what happens is the language changes. In K&1, you'll hear a lot of words that ask the students to identify or solve. As we progress through the standards, it asks students to describe, explain, integrate, and analyze. All of those things lead to that higher order thinking that we've been talking about, and we'll show you guys some examples of how they're applying that in the classroom.
And finally, this is actually a poster at probably all of our schools and all of our classrooms. What does this look like in the classroom? First, there's still ongoing training for teachers. It takes time, like anything. It's really looking at those standards and learning to unpack them so we can give the best lesson that we can for the students. We start with the I can statement, the standard I can statement. What should students be able to do? What can you do? We review that with the student, and that becomes attached to an end formative assessment, like maybe in a journal writing to say how they understood the I can statement. The formative assessment could be a 5-question quiz. It could be in a journal writing. It could have them explaining to the teacher what they actually learned, and the teacher can give them credit for that. And some of the teachers across the district give points and things like that on a daily basis to help the students, because they're finding that this rigorous information, some of the students are being extremely successful, but by the end of the unit, they might kind of forget all the little things that they've learned, so it kind of helps them see what they remember and what they have to review. So this actually has been perfect to kind of create curriculum in the classroom where we're not trying to do so much and not having enough depth. We're doing less with more depth and really getting students to understand the standard the best they can. Okay? You ready?
So
Nice fingernails.
this is the part that we thought it would be. There's nothing like showing evidence of student work. So again, these samples that you're going to see for math, reading and writing are from our grade level elementary students, and we wanted you to see that, number one, what the standards look like the way they're written and what that looks like when a student produces that work. So the first one that I want to share with you is a fifth grade standard regarding decimals. The whole first 9 weeks in fifth grade has been about decimals. And so the standard is use place value understanding to round decimals to any place. Now, initially when you read that, it might not look necessarily rigorous. So read it again, use place value understanding to round decimals to any place. So a lot of what we've brought were samples from, we do a lot of content area journals. So here's an example from one of the students, and I love this child's thinking. What's really important to take a look at, again, the standard is using place value understanding to round decimals to any place. You're seeing a decimal configuration in two different ways.
Hold on a minute. Can you shut the light so maybe we can see a little better? Perfect. Interesting. Who wired this place? Or maybe you could blow that up?
Is there an automatic focus?
Hey. Thank you.
So what you're seeing, this is a sample from a student's content area journal in mathematics. You're seeing two different representations of decimals. And remember when I was talking about mathematics, one of the changes with the standards is that they have to be able to show representative drawings and pictures and graphs about what they're talking about. So this is an example of two different views of that. On the right-hand side, this particular chart, I want to just help you understand what you're looking at. They have the chart listed out in terms of tens, ones, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And so in the first line, it's this traditional 1 and 6/10ths, or 1 and 64 hundredths, or 1 and 643 thousandths. That is the same thing. 1 and 6/10ths is the same thing as 16/10ths. They're showing their understanding of place value as it applies to decimals, not place value as it applies to whole numbers. 1 and 64 hundredths is also equivalent to 164 hundredths. Again, this is a fifth grade child in a Title I school. On the left-hand side, they're doing what's called a vertical line graph to show the exact same understanding of this particular number, 1 and 643 thousandths. And they're showing it in what's called a vertical line graph. And then what ends up happening out of this, another embedded standard within this one problem, is once they have this within a vertical line graph, is the understanding of 6/10ths is greater than 5/10ths. This is a fifth grade student in Hernando County. I'm going to briefly show you what this would have looked like with a prior textbook. Again, I'm talking about rigor in the classroom and what does that look like, and moving away from algorithms. And so previously, the standard talked about rounding decimals, and so students might have been asked just to complete these problems where they were asked to round the numbers to whatever place value is underlined. So again, you can see the comparison between this is algorithmically what we used to do, and now it's all about being able to do this rigorously to a depth at which was not normally seen, in multiple fashions, and then what you're going to see, I'm going to show you some student journals, and then they would explain their thinking and writing. So that's fifth grade. I'm going to also show you fourth grade before I move to the journals. Fourth grade, you gotta love this problem. How many of us had the SAT question about the swimming pool? I'll never forget that one. I'm sorry.
As a former math teacher and a principal of a school it's a Title I school, and it's gone through significant improvement efforts, why is it important for a fifth grade student to understand the multiple representations to be able then to get to the greater than less than? Why is that important? Because, when we were in school, we learned just that you move, if it's 5 or higher, that you just move, and why is that not enough? And why is it better to have...
This is not real world. Students are not going to face this in business. They're not going to be given a worksheet and asked to round numbers to whatever place value. What they are going to be asked, because we are creating students who are going to be successful in college and career, is to take a problem and work together with other individuals in a collaborative group to find multiple solutions to a problem. And the only way you can get there is to understand multiple strategies and multiple means to get to solving a problem. Eventually, after a student is taught multiple strategies, they'll be allowed to select the strategy that makes the most sense for them when they come to a problem like the cement pool problem on the SAT. How many of us struggled with that? And I remember that specifically because I'm a math major and I struggled with that problem on the SAT, because I did not have the conceptual understanding of what went into that problem. But I was a whiz at mathematical fluency. I could tell you my multiplication tables from 0 to 20, but I didn't have that conceptual understanding. So that's what we're building with our elementary students, is here are multiple approaches to get to this problem and multiple configurations of why things are valued at the way they're valued. So when we get to those larger, more rigorous problems, which is what we're going to see in the business world and what we're going to see in college and in careers, we have this wealth of strategies at our disposal and can solve them quickly and well.
Yes, and we often wondered why students struggled with word problems, and that's an example of that you just gave.
I just want to say something before I get to you. But you keep on, in your presentation, use new. Now, it might have happened before any of you were born. But I remember a teacher telling me that it's not good enough just to have the answer. You got to have the reason why you got the answer. So basically, aren't we just correcting what our legislators screwed up in our education system?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess I shouldn't have answered that. Sorry.
Thank you. Matt.
No further questions.
No.
Honesty.
Again, remember the whole shift with moving away from next generation. There's a grid that's published out there in the state that shows how many things kids were expected to learn under next generation, but it was very shallow. And so the idea was shifting back to less things and going very deep.
Two things. When you said you could do your multiplication tables up to 20, it took everything I had not to shout out two numbers at you, just to see if you were, still on point. Actually, after watching you do that, I completely understand now why parents are losing their minds over this. They haven't seen it before, which makes it very, very hard to do it at home without going outside your own wheelhouse. I can tell you that until you showed me what was going on there, I guess if you gave me the rules, I could figure it out because I'm at least, fifth grade level in math, apparently. But I guess this presentation also cements why we have to continue to provide an increasing amount of resources to parents and actually go through the process of teaching the parents so they can reinforce what's occurring. We've effectively taken away the ability of certain parents to even assist their children by changing these standards. And that's going to be scary for a lot of people. I was talking to a parent of a former Springstead High School student, and they were talking about how they basically had to go relearn algebra and all sorts of things like that, which, wasn't my strong suit. So I guess one of the things we're going to have to concentrate on as a board is continuing to provide training and resources to our parents to reinforce what we're doing in the classroom, because if I had a child, which I don't, that I know of, if you sent that, if you sent that home, I would probably have to ask a lot of questions, just to understand exactly what you were shooting for. So one of the questions I guess I really have is, when you're sending this home, you're sending the standard home with it? Because, you know what I mean? Because I think for a lot of people, you look at what you presented in a vacuum, right? And they're like, well, why in the world would I do this, right? But if you sent the standard home, stapled to the top, they might better understand some of those things. I'm happy I have a lot of time to get ready for kids attending Hernando County or Florida schools because, other than reading comprehension, I'm horrible. Yeah. The standards, obviously, the standards will become more rigorous, and we'll be doing law school work in the 4th grade by then, so that's great. I was just pointing out that I guess I very much appreciate this presentation because math is a very weak area for me, so for about 5 seconds until you kind of told me what was going on, I was going, well, I can see how people are upset now.
So to respond to that, one of the things that we're working on this year.
1 second. Do you want to speak now? Or forever hold your peace? Okay.
Okay. We are focusing on professional development and support and training for our parents in multiple ways this year. That we have a committee that we've put together, and we have a Parent Academy website that we're going to be launching soon, as well as videos and links and resources for parents, as well as schools providing parent workshop nights at their schools. The schedule will be listed on the website as well. So we've already started working on the Parent Academy website and how we're going to roll those resources out to our parents, because we definitely recognize, especially with math, that it is a shift and that they need the support so that they're able to assist their child at home. So we're waiting to launch it until we really have it all together and complete. We have a lot of resources that are already ready to go, but we want to make sure that it is complete for grades K-5 to start with.
So what is a ballpark timeline?
We're looking at probably this month, at the end of this month.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, first I wanted to thank all of you for coming forward with this, because I think it is really important. One of the things I found out in the community after being questioned by many, many parents regarding the math was they just didn't understand why you had their kids doing it this way. But when you let them know about the multiple outcomes of the process, I think that they're able to grasp that it's not just to fail their kids. Because I think that a lot of them just felt like, well, they're trying to put my kids back. And I kept saying, well, there's more than just the right answer. There's other things that children will learn. But having the parent academies and putting a website up, phenomenal. Thank you very much for that. Because I think it's really important to have parents supporting what's going on in the classroom. And again, Dr. Romano had commented to me that parents don't want to feel, stupid in front of their children. And that's true. And I'll tell you, it was a very hard day for me when my son started talking something to me and I had no idea what he was talking about. So he has surpassed me in certain things, and that's going to happen. But when it happens at an elementary level, it's rather scary. So thank you for bringing this forward, and hopefully parents will have access to what this little presentation was, because it might help them come to terms with, okay, it's not to hurt my child, but it's to make them better going forward, because that base is so important to have when you keep building upon it and upon it and upon it. So thank you.
I think that's one of the beauties of being at a Title I school is the opportunity to have those parent nights by grade level and by subject area. And so our coaches are present and we go through the standards and we go through what homework is going to look like and what the expectation is. And we hear it from parents all the time, and we do hear, I learned by algorithm and that's how I know how to help them, and I don't know how to help them. And so within our schools in Hernando County, there's a lot of understanding of that. And again, the parent nights really help the parents with understanding of what that's going to look like.
I have another question on that. On those nights that you have, are parents from other schools welcome to attend those?
I'll take anybody who would like to come.
Maybe we can do a better job of getting that information out so that parents, even if they're school is not Title I can go attend those nights or attend multiple if that's what it takes, because sometimes you have to hear it 2 or 3 times before you really grasp it. That would be awesome.
And on the Parent Academy website, we have the schedule built already for all of the parent nights that have been scheduled at all of the schools, so that'll be posted there. So,
Mrs. DeVault.
Taking what Beth has suggested, the thought came to me, and it may not even be workable. However, would there be a way for you all to do just what you are doing right now, but have it, and this may date me, video, and placed on each school's website and the district website, because you can't always have parents, or you don't always get parents who can come in for these parent evenings. So while it's not a cure-all or a fix-all by any stretch, it's another way of communicating what you all are saying about this entire issue to parents who, hey, and I understand not everyone has a computer, but it's just another access point for parents. If they were able to actually see you all talking about what you just presented to us, maybe it's just another way of disseminating good information. Take it for what it's worth, maybe 2 cents.
Where would they see it? Where would they see it? You says that I know a lot of people don't have computers, so where would they see it?
Post it on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. I don't know.
We could put it on the Parent Academy website to start with. One of the things that we're working on is we have video. We've gone out and we've videotaped multiple schools, multiple classrooms, and we're going to take that video and do a voiceover so that as parents are watching, we could be explaining what is basically what you're saying, but doing the voiceover with the video so that we can walk the parent through step by step what that process looks like.
They did, and you're going to see an example of that during the superintendent's update, so you can visually see what it looks like that we're going to produce. The other interesting thing for me has been every week our staff, we're doing district walkthroughs at school sites, and we're providing principals and their teams with information back about how the implementation is going. And the staff will send back pictures from each of those work samples from the schools and of the students. And I, at times, will put those out on the superintendent's icon. And fascinating for me has been that people will open that up, they will download all of those work samples, and teachers in particular at different grade levels, in particular high school, will download elementary examples because it's of interest to them to see what's happening and how it's impacting there, and then also to share ideas, to get ideas from each other. So there's some really good work going on in terms of sharing.
We have, we've done some really creative things this year with sharing across content levels and across elementary and secondary. And recently I've had a couple secondary principals join me at an elementary walkthrough. And after that walkthrough, we set up a time for that secondary principal to visit an elementary school to see what that progression, what Ms. Garofano talked about in regards to standard progression, to see what that looks like at the elementary level, specifically, ELA and writing, because we have just like we have in math, we have a big shift with writing as well. So we're doing some really creative things that we've really never tapped into before, and the collaboration that's coming from that is very powerful. So.
I want to hear about the pool.
So the next sample that I have is a sample of a 4th grade standard. And so the first one that I shared was 5th grade. And it looked a little less rigorous maybe because there were not as many words.
By the way, is there a word you can use besides vigorous?
Rigorous?
Vigor.
Hard?
What's that?
Hard. Difficult. Higher order. Depth of knowledge.
I think that scares everybody.
This is a fourth grade standard, and I'll call your attention to the first word on the standard. Ask students to apply the area and perimeter formulas for rectangles in real-world mathematical problems. So again, fourth grade is where our first kids in kindergarten caught wind of Common Core and had to start explaining their thinking and struggle with the problem and persevere in solving them. So I'm really proud of how challenging this particular standard is and what it looks like for students. Oops, sorry. So the reason I selected this one is because, again, this is first 9 weeks. What you see in the first paragraph is that she was trying to explain her thinking. Now, we have some work to do because explaining your thinking isn't just a recitation of the steps that you followed to solve the problem, but we're getting there. And so when you take a look at, and I think Ms. Duval would appreciate this because, again, we're looking at SAT-style problems. I mean, I just keep going back to the swimming pool problem. The question, the example was, find the width of a rectangular room given the area of the flooring and the length by viewing the area formula as a multiplication equation with an unknown factor. This is fourth grade in Hernando County, and this is what Florida Standards talks about real-world situations. So this particular child not only explained her thinking, but actually showed her solution to these problems utilizing the formula with the unknown variable. This is the swimming pool problem. And then there's one other within this one that I really liked. It was talking about the library. This one is really, really interesting because the problem itself talked about the fact that the library, the rectangular projection screen in the school auditorium is 5 times as long and 5 times as wide as the rectangular screen in the library. And so what this individual had to do was actually script out that first part of the problem and then show what it looked like for the second part of the problem, and then actually went through the solution to get that problem. This is what it looks like in the library, and this is what it looks like in the auditorium. This is Hernando County fourth grade. And this is really the reason for the curriculum map, because of the fact that it is instructing the students at the level of rigor at which the standard is written. So then the last thing I would like to share with you, and we're going to share some samples with you after I go through them, is a sample of a student content area journal. And it's really cute. Like, we asked them to do a table of contents so that they can quickly go to anything within that particular content area standards that we did during the day. Within a content journal, you're going to see it isn't, this is where I just work out my algorithmic problems. It's where they do their reflection on what they learned for the day. It's where they do any vocabulary they want to capture and hold on to. It's where many times formative assessments are embedded. So this is really an important piece in an elementary classroom. And we at Eastside have spent the last 2 years working on what a quality content area journal looks like. And so again, you're going to have some samples for that in just a few minutes. When we talk about explaining the way to solve a problem, there's several ways you can do it, and this is a situation where students were allowed to do a graphic organizer under a thinking map to explain how they solved a problem. And so this is subtracting decimals, and they used a flow map. And again, an opportunity for them to explain their thinking. So it's moving away from here's this worksheet, and let's just subtract decimals, to I want you to explain the process that you took to actually subtract those decimals. My Eastside kids have really good handwriting. This is this one I selected because this is a good example of a student explaining their thinking in terms of comparing decimals. And then, yes, and then the last thing is I've tabbed 3 of the same things in each of the samples. When we talk about formative assessment, and it's something that the teacher does to make certain that the instruction for the day was successful before moving on, because math builds on itself, and if they didn't get today's lesson, they're not going to get tomorrow's lesson. And the age-old lecture of I'm moving on and you just have to keep up, that's gone. And so a formative assessment is handled very well in a content area journal, and it can be in the form of a reflection where they reflected on what they did for the day. And then in this particular situation, the teacher gave some good feedback to the student. So it was graded, but also some good feedback. All right, so we're going to share some samples from Eastside from 5th grade notebooks while our next presenter is getting ready for reading. I don't know if you want to share this one out.
This is cool stuff.
Isn't it cold out?
Really? This is 4th grade?
Those are 5th grade.
5th grade.
Fifth. I was going to say, you do penmanship?
Very proud of my students.
This is the kind of stuff that makes me feel proud to be part of the school system. That's right.
No questions are dopey.
Thank you. Maybe a little. On the pool question, down bottom, you had looked like you had some number bond things going on. Could you explain the purpose of those to me? Because I don't know that I know why they're there. Well, we decided we were swimming at Lori's because it was the bigger pool, but you had it up there.
It was actually a formula.
No, it was the next page, I think you had behind it. You had like all these little things coming down from 8 to a bunch of 4s and stuff.
Oh,
That's what you were showing me before.
It was towards the bottom of the page.
This one?
this one is actually,
that's it.
It's taking the sides of that original rectangle and using the
and just adding them
perimeter
across.
formula.
Okay.
So it's the 2 4s added with the 2 3s. And then students are taught, to use the easiest method to get the solution. So 4 and 4 is 8, 3 and 3 is 6.
Oh, so it's just combining them to
Yes.
make the question smaller? Okay. But is it wrong if they didn't do that?
No, because there's multiple strategies that they could have used
Okay.
to solve that. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I wouldn't break it that, I just wouldn't do it that way myself.
So old-fashioned. This is the new stuff.
I've got new kids, so I can.
Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about today is English language arts, and I'm going to be covering the reading piece, and then Ms. Fervent will talk about writing and the progression of writing. This is an example of a 4th grade language arts notebook, and similar to what they're doing in math, you'll see that they use this as a resource. It's also a place where they reflect, set goals. You'll see some examples of formative assessments and some I can statements as well that we talked about earlier. You can see that in the language arts, this is a 4th grade student, by the way. These are some examples of things that they'll do in their language arts journal. This is where they had to actually go in and mark some text, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and then answer to some questions. So for example, this student had to write some goals basically, and these go right back to those standards. So this 4th grade student said within the next 2 weeks, I will be able to summarize a piece of nonfiction text in my own words, describe the structure used in an informational piece of text, and figure out the main idea by thinking about the details. So it's obvious that the teacher went through what the standard was going to be. The standard for this one is determining the main idea of a text and explaining how it's supported by key details. And so you can see here where the student had to go through this text and then answer to using this lovely little organizer that they talked about, and then finding evidence from the text that supports their answer. This is an example of inferencing skills, and once again, going right back to the standard. The standard talks about referring to details and examples in a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. So this was just a little chart that the teacher had them glue in, and it shows them different sentence starters that they might see. These are kind of clues that they might use when drawing upon text or figuring out what inferences were in a piece of text. They can use their journal to go back and use it as a resource. Here's an example of them doing a little bit of a chart as they were going through a photograph and using some inferencing skills in that case. And then this is an I can statement. This once again goes right back to a standard. It talks about how main characters' feelings and actions are related to the story's theme. And then the student talked about different strategies, different reading strategies that student would use when they're reading some text. The teacher then had them read The Lion and the Mouse, which some of you may have heard of by Exerpt. And you can see that the student had to write what the theme of a story was, and then had to write here, this was actually a formative assessment that the teacher used to determine if the student was able to master the standard. Was the student able to figure out the main idea, or the theme, based on the main character's feelings? And I have some examples of that to share with you as well. And then I also wanted to share with you today what it looks like when they take, some of you may have heard of their every 2-week reading test in Part A, Part B. And so I just wanted to show you what that looks like as we progress through the grade levels and what the teachers are requiring the students to do. This is an example of a weekly test that they take. Basically, our students take a reading test every 2 weeks. It's called a balance test. It's straight from our curriculum. And on the other weeks, they do what's called a performance task, and that's typically a writing assessment that they're doing. So this is an example of a kindergarten student, and the reason that these things are color-coded is because even starting in kindergarten, we teach our students how to text mark and text code. So students have to basically attack text with purpose. So teachers will say to a student, we're going to go through and you're going to mark every animal that you see in this text on our first time reading this. And then the second time they might go through and do something that's a little bit more complicated. But what that does, number one, is it makes sure that students are taking their time as they're reading text. It also gives them a frame of reference to go back to when they're looking for the answers in the text. Students will also have to use this text to do written responses and provide evidence from text. So them being able to text mark is extremely important as they progress through all grade levels. And as you guys know, college and career readiness, in college, we have to cite text evidence all the time. This is just a progression of that starting all the way up to, or as early as kindergarten. So you'll see the teachers require our students to mark the paragraph. That's one of the skills that they need to be able to do. And then you'll see that the student had to answer to a Part A and Part B. Now in kindergarten, they're still reading the text to them. They're reading the questions with them and doing a lot of modeling at this point in time. But I just wanted to show you that it does start as early as kindergarten. And then we move to what it looks like in second grade. And you'll see this is actually a student who marked the text, went through and took the test, and on their first attempts received a score of a 50. The teacher then retaught some of those skills that student was lacking, and they actually were able to retest and reassess, and that student ended up with a 70. But I just wanted to show you that we require our students to go back into the text and mark things with the Part A and Part B. In grade 4, you'll see the same exact thing. In fact, sometimes their tests look like road maps, and I can't really figure out what's going on. But you'll see here that this teacher requires the students to go through, not only mark the text, but they also have to go back and mark where they found the answers. You'll see, for example, number 2 down here. And then when you go into the actual test, you'll see how they had to go through and mark out the answers that they did not feel were correct. So Part A and Part B. And basically, the teachers are teaching them to figure out the most correct answer. And sometimes that's frustrating, and I'm sure you've heard about that, because sometimes there maybe is two answers that seem like they may be correct, but we have to teach our students how to go back into the text and find the most correct answer. So this is some of the, these are some of the strategies that this teacher is doing. You'll also see that this teacher actually has them write down which question they thought was the hardest, what their goals are for next time, and things like that as they go through it. So it's kind of a self-check that the teacher has them do. When our students bring a test up and if they have not done all of these different strategies to ensure that they're successful, the teacher will ask them to go back and redo what they've done before they even grade the assessment.
I have a question.
Yes,
How long does it take a teacher to grade a test like that?
a long time. Yes.
Hours?
Well, typically, luckily, these are tests that they give every other week. So that helps a little bit. We've lessened the number of tests we're actually giving our students during the year. But yeah, it takes them a while to go back through. And, you know, obviously a student who has it all correct is a little bit easier than a student where they have to go back and reteach. But that's an important part of what we're doing, because that means that there's gaps in that student's learning. So they take the time. Our teachers are amazing. They're rock stars. This is an example of a constructed response that's, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
I did.
Okay.
When you're talking about test A and test B, do both parts count on the student's grade? Or
Yes.
so like they get graded on test A and then
It's what it
and on B?
is you may have heard of, and I'll show this example again. This is part A and part B. So basically they're answering to a question. This, for example, says, which of the following best describes the author's purpose for writing a film with a message of hope? They have to figure out what was the author's purpose. And then they go and they have to figure out which of the sentences below best supports your answer to part A.
Okay, no,
so
I
that's
was
the part A,
talking
part
about
B.
when you had the test and then you
I'm
reteach and
sorry.
you retest.
Okay,
That's-
the second grade, once the students are reassessed, is what counts for that student.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, because our ultimate goal, obviously, is that they've mastered those skills. Correct. Yes, that's our policy. This is an example of something that you would see in a language arts test where they're doing a constructed response. And you'll see here they have to use details from the selection to support their ideas. And so this is a writing example from 4th grade. And this is actually part of our English language arts assessment. And then Ms. Vermette will talk a little bit more about writing and what that looks like across the board. Reading questions?
I was only going to say that, you know, I very much appreciate this. Best answer tests are horribly subjective, in that if you have a student at a younger age that is a relatively good critical thinker, they can often justify it. I always found that if there was a best answer test, you had to provide an adequate amount of space for the child to explain their answer. And what I lived with when I was younger was best answer test with no chance to explain how you got there. And, you know, you would often walk up to the teacher and say, well, no, it's this because, and they would say something like, oh, I didn't think of that, or whatever the case may be. I'll also tell you that, like, once you get to law school, like, if that was something a student decided to do, it's exactly the opposite. It's throw as many things at the wall as you possibly can that might work and go from there. So the progression of students preparing in this way, it prepares them for some things but not others. I saw the best answer thing, you know, for example, something can be both persuasive and entertaining, you know what I mean? You can use the idea that it's entertaining to persuade, stuff like that. So I've often found those tests somewhat objectionable, you know what I mean? Especially for younger students.
Okay. Writing. I have to preface this before I show you some writing that I have never, well, for a long time, heard students actually get excited about writing. But last year it started to happen. And this year I walk through classrooms and all they want to do is show me their writing. And it's amazing, it's amazing because the one subject, even when I remember being in school, is no, don't make us write. So turning it into being so valued and making it that important to have students jump up to show me what they wrote is amazing. So this is what, and we're still kind of undergoing a lot of our expectations being raised in each grade level, but our students are rising to the occasion and they are meeting those expectations. And even if teachers are, overwhelmed with it and how much we have to do, I have to tell my teachers, and I told one today, but you're doing it. And I said, it's amazing you're doing it. So that was kind of an aha moment for me as a principal this morning. Kindergarten. This, I'm going to show you two, I have several samples, but I am going to show you a student that, first they write the where is it? I'm at the wrong one. Okay, so the kindergarten papers are very long because what we do in kindergarten, it's where the student's ready. And I know I just read a newspaper article that some don't even have, they can't even hold a pencil yet. So in our school, we scaffold that. This is a student who can hold a pencil, and they're required several things. They have anchor papers up where shows what's a good paper and not, and first they start with kind of a picture so they can get it in their mind. And this student, as you can see, the letter formation is very well, and then they did really well. And we have these little checklists at the bottom, and they got a 4 on that rubric. A student who may have been in the same class that had difficulty writing by themselves, this is theirs. As you can see, we scaffold it because halfway through, they are practicing letter formation, and then at the bottom, they start to create their own writing. So especially the first 9 weeks, you'll see kindergarten at very different levels. Everyone's expected to do it. How they get there may be a different road, but all teachers differentiate with that. So it is amazing. And then some sheets are longer than others in our hallway because some students are just at the point where they can copy, and then others want to add, and they're allowed to. And that's what's kind of exciting. So when students see that, they want to add pages, and they want to make it long, like a long man or something. So you'll see all different sizes for kindergarten. That's kindergarten if they want to see that. And then in first grade, they go, and first grade kind of has a long page too, and it kind of looks like this. This is a first grade writing. They don't copy, except students that may be new to our school. Some letter formation's better than others. They always start with a graphic organizer, and then they, too, have a rubric. And specific comments are to be praised. Here's another first grade. Look at that handwriting, first grade, all by themselves. That's amazing. And they're writing it. They do get help. That's the first copy. They go back and rewrite, but that's all their own writing. And then they actually started with the graphic organizer, write a copy, and then go back and finish it. They have to finish it in order to make it to the hallway for exemplar writing. So all students know that they can and will achieve, just maybe a different time. So we have places in the classroom where their work gets posted. That's first grade. And I'm just taking you quickly through what second grade looks like, and you can see it gets more and more in depth. This is a second grade, and these are all this first 9 weeks. So this is a second grade writing, and all students get a rubric, and it shows what they can work on and how they can increase. That's a second grade. Here's a second grade from another class. And of course, they get told specific things that they love about their writing. And our hopes are when students walk through the halls, they actually look at other people's writing, and they look and they say, they had a good conclusion. So then their focus that day may be on their conclusion.
How long do they have to write something like that?
I'm sorry?
How long? How much time do they have?
It depends on the grade, and it's multiple days. And they all have ELA blocks, and writing's done across the curriculum, so it is a portion of their ELA block. They can be started by modeling. The teacher can model. The students who are ready to go can finish it at centers. Or some students, like the student in kindergarten, I will tell you when I walk through my kindergarten class, students were writing, And then the ones that needed help with letter formation was sitting in a small group with a teacher. So it's all based on what they're able and ready to do. And usually the first day is the introduction, so teachers have to kind of check for understanding, see who's ready, see who has the ideas in their head to be able to write. So that was second grade. Third grade's even more amazing. I'm really, really proud of my students at the school. This is just one, but I wanted to show you this. The teacher took, it's just kind of a little strategy, Oreo opinion writing. This is like an intro paragraph, but as you can see, the writing doesn't stop. They continue, continue until they have an end product. That was in the very beginning. You can see 22, 15. And then they go into where they get even more in depth with their writing. And then all students did actually a paper like this. You see how they add the pages to it? So they can go as far as they want, and if you can see. So the handwriting, and you know, most students today don't want to take the time with writing and take the time at doing it correctly, but we have been trying every day to show how important it is at our school, so all students actually want to do good, and they want their work out in the hallway. So if you ever want to visit, you can come by and see that. This is fourth grade. Unfortunately, fourth grade sent their writing home before I knew I was doing this presentation, but they had a couple. You can see 921. In the curriculum maps, they start with an intro, and they really go in depth on what a good hook intro is. And so they spent a couple of weeks going on a special intro, and then these papers went home because now they're on their body. And then at the end, they'll have it all together. So this is like a copy of what they did, and then they create it. So they see the beginning, the end. Instead of rushing a paper, really create that intro that's like to get someone to read it. And by the end, the conclusion is to have somebody walk away and say, wow, you know, and to really look at that. And then fifth grade, here's another introduction where they had to get someone to kind of catch the thinking. And it was about hurricanes and tornadoes and what was important. So they have to come up with their own interesting intro. But then if you can see here, this is their actual paper, their body. And now they'll be working on their conclusion. So that's just, and I have several more fifth grade. You can see fifth grade, that's a fifth grade paper. And they're all my classrooms, the students are expected to at the end, have an end product with the same, using the same standard and same theme. It creates teachers working together, something for the kids to strive for, the students, when they walk through the hallway to see that theme. So it really kind of gets them excited about writing. And I just have some samples if you want to, if you would like to see them.
It's pretty neat to see the progression from K to all the way to fifth grade.
It is exciting, like when we started really pushing writing at our school, and I know all the schools are pushing writing because that's going with the ELA expectations. But when we started pushing it, we actually took our fifth graders back to kindergarten, and they were like, wow, you know. So it kind of really, kind of a whole school culture.
And they get used to using the checklists and the rubrics too from kindergarten on, which is
Standards, rubrics, anchor papers, checklists, they all have to be done.
We have a writing plan for grades K-10, and it's something that the teachers really wanted. We haven't had in our county in a long time. But some of the things that Ms. Vermette talked about in regards to writing and the resources are all part of the writing plan and incorporated in the writing plan. She showed you the Oreo strategy. The teachers have access to all of the resources that go along with that, and the writing coaches provide training to the teachers so that they feel comfortable using the strategies that are embedded in the plan.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you.